I'm Scott Allen Miller. This is Sam IT, and on today's episode, we're going to be talking about what is the difference between IT and bench services. This is a big one. This comes up all the time. I talk about this continuously, and we don't have a great answer. Or finally, we have a pretty good one, but it's a little bit difficult. So IT, I hate the term information technology. It doesn't really tell you what IT does. I prefer the term business infrastructure because IT, when you work in IT, everything you do is about business. You're really a business discipline. I'm a business discipline. I work in IT, I work in business. That I use technology to do what I do in business is almost ancillary. Not quite, but really close. I like to say that generally, working in IT is 80% business, 20% tech. Every single thing we do, or almost every single thing we do, has a business context. We have to think about how this will impact the business. Every time we make a decision, whether it's how quickly we answer a ticket, whether it's what operating system we choose, whether it's how we approach a disaster, or how we present things to managers, all of it happens in a business context. We may forget that that's why we do things, but it doesn't change the fact that that is the basis that makes our jobs make sense. Bench is different. Bench is a pure tech field. It's 100% tech or 99% tech. Bench exists where no business exists. For example, home users don't have IT. They just don't. It doesn't make any sense. But home users do have tech that needs to be taken care of, and they have bench for that. Now, it is very common that people will get confused and think that bench means less than IT, that it's a lower field, and people get a little bit offended in many cases when they find out that they're doing a lot of bench work and that people don't consider them IT. This is not the case, not at all. It's simply one is a business field with a little bit of tech and one is a tech field, and we do different things. Bench workers or bench pros or whatever you want to call them do start on the lowest end. There is a low end of bench that tends to go lower than IT does as a starting point. But both go pretty low, so that doesn't mean very much. Both tend to push minimum wage at the very, very lowest jobs. For IT, those lowest end jobs are typically help desk. It might be desk side support, but normally it's help desk where you're taking calls and helping end users with really basic problems. That's where IT starts and tends to hit the $10 an hour range. Bench, on the other hand, doesn't tend to take calls like that, but starts in the same price range, typically doing things like Geek Squad or Staples type work where you may be selling cables or helping someone get a virus off their machine or something like that, installing someone's hard drive. As you can see, the bench one's more technical than the IT one, but the IT one is something that's more applicable in a business. Bench, of course, exists in every business. You can't do IT without bench to support you. So every place that you have IT, you have someone doing bench. And in most cases, and this is what makes it confusing, you can't afford a bench person to do the bench work. You have to have someone else do it, and the logical person is the IT person who's never going to be busy enough with IT to not do the bench work. Right? In an SMB, the actual amount of true IT work that you would need even for 100 people is often only 5 hours a week. But bench work might require a lot more, or in some cases, you do work that's neither of those and just do electrical work. For example, if you're doing a lot of cable termination or running wires, that's not bench and it's not IT. That's electrical. But often, same thing, the IT person is the logical person to fill in when you don't have enough of any given role to have experts in those different fields. IT is the one that tends to lead the way and fill in the gaps. And what happens is, and one of the reasons that we get the feeling that those other fields are so much lower, is that in a case like this, we have an IT person who is there and paid to make IT business decisions. So their core role, the thing that gives them value, is their ability to integrate business infrastructure and convey that to the business and do what the business needs and make those decisions. When they then need to do bench work or electrical work, the work that they're doing is normally extremely entry level for those fields, and that's why we're not bringing in a bench professional or an electrician. That's why the IT person can simply fill in and do those other bits of work that need to be done in and around IT. For example, you need a desktop set up. Well, you wouldn't call someone from human resources or someone from accounting to stop what they're doing and go do this completely disconnected work. It's just impractical, but they could. There's nothing really special about it. But this is an entry-level bench job. And if you had a large enough organization, you would have bench or even physical facilities people who did this. when you have one IT person who's mostly idle and that IT person needs to work on or set up that computer once it's been deployed, it's only logical that they be the one to deploy it because they're the one that's waiting on it and is directly going to interface it once it's done. So it's just a matter of logistics that make it seem like those are entry-level jobs and IT is the senior one. If you were in a completely different role where you did a lot of bench work and once in a while needed a tiny bit of low-end IT, you'd have exactly the opposite effect. But we generally don't see that. It's just not how the world works. Bench jobs start low end, same as IT, and like IT, they go fairly high. Now, you don't tend to have something like a CIO in the bench world, so IT tends to go quite a bit higher and is the larger field overall. But bench goes relatively high and easily hits six-figure jobs, with the top jobs often being data center techs, the people who are 24/7 on call, work in really large enterprise data centers, and do rack and stacks and deal with really high-end hardware like IBM mainframes and Oracle minis and Fujitsu mini computers, RISC machines, large Unix machines, take care of motherboard replacements and physical hardware troubleshooting, disk replacements, RAID setup, things like that. The people who are making the physical infrastructure work for you, and whether you are using a co-location facility for that, or so it's outsourced, or you're using an in-house, your own enterprise data center, typically you're going to have that kind of staff, and they are dedicated and non-IT, and generally would not report up the IT infrastructure, or if they do, there was a separate department under IT, or at least a discipline under the IT group. Managing them together does make sense because there's a lot of overlap, but their expertise does not really overlap, so it doesn't make sense for them to actually be completely merged as long as you actually have dedicated people for each role. And typically, we want that separation of duty in an enterprise or even in a moderate-sized SMB simply because it works really, really well for your bench people to have access to the hardware in a way that would be risky if they also had access to the systems themselves. And likewise, your IT people, you don't want them having full access to the hardware because they have access to the systems. By having the separation of duty, it actually makes it relatively hard for someone to, on the hardware side, simply walk off and get a lot of useful data by stealing hardware other than the hardware itself. Of course, stealing a server always gives you the black market value of the hardware, whatever. But the real fear is that you're going to walk off with something super valuable because you got, for example, all the accounting data for the company. On the systems side, the systems people know where that accounting data is, how to access it, and where the valuable secrets are held, where the skeletons are in the closet. If they had access to all of the hardware and could simply grab it and walk out with all of the hardware and have that systems knowledge, they could very often do a significant amount of damage. But by separating them, you mitigate the risks from both sides significantly. The systems people don't have access to the hardware, the bench people don't have access to the systems knowledge. Of course, those teams could get together and have a conspiracy, but that is much less likely and a lot easier to catch. So in an enterprise space, it's really common to find that IT people are not allowed to get close to the hardware, or if they do, it needs to be an arranged tour, and they may not be told which hardware is theirs versus someone else on a different team. And likewise, the bench people often will not have access to the IT knowledge and the IT teams. They'll be kept completely separate. Bench, by its very nature, needs to be the ones that touch computers. IT, by its very nature, never needs to touch computers, or essentially never does, other than their own computer, of course. But if you're going to work on a server, it is normal in the enterprise space and increasingly normal in the SMB space, because once we separate bench out, there's no reason that an IT systems administrator would ever need to actually see or touch or know the hardware of their servers that they're working on. In fact, now that we have virtualization, we're even another layer separated from that. But even before then, even in the 1990s, we had this separation, and the IT folks never actually had to see or touch or know about the servers. They only needed to know what was running on top and how much performance they were getting out of it. So both fields are very important. Both exist everywhere. Both have starting points that are very low. Both go very high, are a very respectable field. There's simply different ways of approaching things. One of the most important things that we think about as ways to define them, because I realize everything we've said still leaves a lot of ambiguity, but one of the things that we think about is that bench delivers technology. That is their deliverable when they do work. So in any bench job, you will, when you've done your work, deliver things like a working operating system, or functional hardware, or fix a failed drive, or remove a virus. That's technical, it's not business. In the IT world, everything that we deliver is a solution, not technology. We could care less in the IT world whether technology is used to do something or not. In the bench world, we care about the technology, and it's technology we deliver. And in IT, we deliver business solutions. So IT sees the world in the business had a need and we solved it. That we solved it with technology is pretty much assumed, but it's not required. It's not what's important. It's solving the business need. So we find bench and IT in different places. They interact, they play important roles together, but they are different. Just as IT and software engineering have a lot of in common overlap, but do different things with different types of deliverables. And defining all of these roles by their deliverables makes them make a lot more sense. And understanding IT is business, bench is tech, and while they overlap, completely different fields. It's also important to note that because a lot of people are confused about the two, and because bench has a larger variety of entry points to its field, a lot of people attempt to go through bench to get into IT. And this sometimes works, but it's really a brute force method where mostly you're just gaining work expertise or work experience over time. And by doing that, anyone who has a lot of work experience has a better time getting into a different field. If you wanted to become a chemist, it's easier to do that with 10 years of solid technical work experience outside of the field than it is with none. And that's why going through bench to get to IT does seem to work a little. But if you look at people who do that path, going through bench simply makes your IT field take that much longer for you to excel in, and vice versa. If your goal is bench, working in IT isn't going to get you ahead in that field. They will hold you back a lot. And that's why when you see people who are doing, for example, retail store work that is bench, and they want to get into IT, that often they'll spend 3 or 5 or 10 years working at very low wages and finding that there's a huge barrier to entry into IT, and they then associate that typically with other things that, oh, enterprise is hard to break into, or you need special certifications or something, or they'll think you needed to go to university. But if you took those same people and didn't have them enter at bench, but instead go for entry-level IT, doing help desk or so, or were trained in whatever IT discipline they were interested in, you can start in IT the same as you can start in bench. Work at the beginning and work your way up. But if you start in IT, working your way up happens quickly because you're in the field you want to get into. If you want to work, let's just say you want to manage a hotel, yes, if you want to become a hotel manager, starting in IT and putting in 10 years and becoming an experienced, well-proficient IT professional, and then you want to switch to hotel management, you will be ahead by a lot of people who go directly into hotel management out of high school. But if you compare your overall career trajectories, the person who goes right out of high school directly into hotel management will get ahead of the person who's in IT very quickly because they won't be wasting 10 years doing something unrelated. So brute force sometimes makes things misleading if we don't realize we're in the wrong field, not doing something that's leading us where we need to go. So I hope that helps separate IT and bench. I'm sure there will be questions. Put them in the comments below. I will link to another thread where we have even more discussion about IT and bench. And remember, both are important fields. Just because people in IT sometimes do bench work creates a false impression, and we don't want that to mislead us as to the importance and the technicalities of bench work. Remember to like and subscribe and support us on Patreon.